You don't want me to talk about that. You don't want me to talk about how right now, when it is 35 days shy of a very important benchmark, that they're talking about potentially implicating 54 people associated with the investigation of Rudy Giuliani, but you don't want to talk about the 34 people that were allegedly implicated in connection with the Hillary Clinton email scam in the summer of 2000, what was that? 19? Right around the time that Jeffrey Epstein died. There was an announcement that 34 people in connection with Hillary Clinton's time of service as Secretary of State had been subpoenaed, if not actually indicted, in consideration of their relationship to the allegations concerning the text messages. You mean like how text messages in the hands of somebody with the kind of technology and cyber protocols that the Department of State has can be used as radiological weapons? You mean how cell phones, including in connection with embedded links into people's electronic accounts, and in connection with other sorts of things that could be disabused as part of alleged national security, could be used in acts of political reprisal against opposition, including in manners that actually target them with directed energy weapons, up to and including the point where they experience such severe neurological trauma that they're incapable of speaking coherently, that they may be hearing multiple bandwidths concurrently because of the disturbance to their own processes, and or might even have a problem where their optic nerves have been so damaged because of bombardment with radiation that they can't even see correctly. I mean, it does cause actual medical trauma. It does actually cause physical trauma, but it's not necessarily indicative of some sort of mental illness that is part of a genetic predisposition based on their demographics and family line, especially if you've got the Secretary of State and the Department of State, including the Department of State's oversight of the CIA, engaging in use of electronic warfare, including in connection with their social media activities or specific technological regimes they're able to work with, the government sponsored technology they have access to. You don't think anything about these things is related. Okay, because I know you don't want me to talk about those things, and I also know you want me to kind of look the other way, that somehow just today there was a mistaken identity in relationship to the mail, and the mail just so happens to have the name of my sister and is from a Muller, just not with the E, right? What is this? Willfulness. As discussed, to establish a criminal campaign finance violation, the government must prove that the defendant acted knowingly and willfully. 52 USC section 30109D1AI. That standard requires proof that the defendant knew generally that his conduct was unlawful. Election offenses 1, 2, 3. Right? 1, 2, 3. Given the uncertainties noted above, the willfulness requirement would pose a substantial barrier to prosecution. Constitutional considerations. Finally, the First Amendment could pose constraints on prosecution. What kind of constraints on prosecution? Well, apparently, there's a harm to the ongoing matter in revealing what the constitutional considerations are. Look at this. Have you ever seen so much black space? So it's okay to present an expose with all of these scandalous details about spurious accusations that are, by legal definition, much more likely to be considered hearsay if they were actually presented in a court of law, unless they were actually substantiated with documentation to back it up. But when it comes to the constitutional considerations, what would you call that? Is that a legal strategy? Were you able to black it out when it came to providing it to the public, but maybe able to copyright it and turn it into some kind of weapons paradigm? What about other people's arguments around constitutional considerations that have been presented through a court of law while they've been denied all due process? And then they later on end up tracking how their legal filings and what they explicate in their legal filings are literally sold abroad, including through clandestine channels, to be used as weapons by other countries, including weapons against people engaged in ordinary political process in their own country, including in and through the police, announced on the day that a bank that refused to be held accountable or hold itself accountable for financing acts of domestic and international terrorism is paying out dividends on a major stock deal created through the expropriation of the private property of the people in this country that's been allowed to be swapped out with other countries and their stock, right? What happened to those 34 indictments concerning those people alleged to be co-conspiring with the former Secretary of State in using electronic warfare against political opposition, including in their own country? What does that have to do with the Russian hacking of the 2016 campaign? What more or less does that have to do with the Russian hacking in the 2016 campaign than Bank of America refusing to investigate allegations of acts of wire fraud through their bank that financed an act of terrorism in Bangladesh and also led to the murders of 5 police officers in Dallas during the campaign season?